And ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brent Thomas, and you are tuned into the Paranormal Portal, and we are thrilled you are here with us. Thanks for joining us. We hope you're having a wonderful weekend. It's been a busy Saturday for us here on the Portal. Don and myself have been rolling all day, but we've had an epic day, and we're having an epic night so far, ladies and gentlemen. This is a great night for us. We're very excited about tonight's show. But let me first introduce my good friend and co-host, Mr. Don Longbeard.
My name's Donnie.
You just stole Jimmy's line. That's not even nice. We love you, Jimmy.
We love Jimmy. We do.
Jimmy is the host of Into the Microcosm, and that's his tagline. My
But
name is Jimmy.
I heard you when you say, my name's Brent, and I just went, yep, okay, I got it. I got to do it.
No, I wasn't playing off of that.
No, you weren't, but I was.
But Don did. He went there, ladies and gentlemen, and that's just what happens here on the Portal. But we are absolutely thrilled you're with us here tonight, and we have a wonderful show ahead of us, a very special guest, and a man who's fast coming, a very good friend of the show, and has been here once before, had an amazing discussion, amazing conversation, and I've been just totally amped to get him back on, and tonight's the night, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you, Mr. Jim the Bear King, to the Paranormal Portal once again. Welcome to the show,
Hey,
Bear.
Bear.
How y'all doing?
Oh, we're doing great, brother. It's really fantastic to have you here again. Don, did my screen fall? It did, didn't it?
Oh, it did.
Yeah, it did.
Wow.
Sorry, we got a special
Hold on a
effect
sec.
issue here, Bear. The studio's falling apart. All my duct tape and
Hey,
baling
I
wire.
didn't do it. I ain't sitting there.
It's all my duct tape and baling wire all giving up on me, but I got some down home fixing going on here. I know how to do this.
Get some duct tape. Duct tape fix everything. We know that down here.
That and baling twine, right?
And if duct tape don't work, get a big hammer.
Absolutely. Well, again, welcome to the show. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're not familiar with the Bear, he is one of the premier researchers of the Bigfoot phenomenon here in the United States and North America. Very well known, a celebrity of definitely within the field, but he's also one of the original outlaws. So how you doing, brother?
Oh, I'm doing great. I don't know if I'm a legend in the field.
Oh,
Some
God.
folks call me other things, but I get over that real quick. It don't bother me a lick, It all depends on the person. I ain't nothing but a old country boy from Mississippi, and on the first show I kind of discussed being sort of raised up in a situation where I had a mentor that knew about these things before I did, and he kind of eased me and my brother into it, as we was yonkers. And I learned a long time ago, you can tell a old country boy to do something, and, more than likely he's going to tell you to do something involving your mama and a goat.
Oh, no.
Cowboys and country boys are raised to be gentlemen, and they know it, and they expect to be asked very politely, and then you get more out of them.
Uh-huh.
But when you get a bunch of country boys together, they just practice their well-raised manners by beating the hell out of each other all the time. So, it's not a complicated situation. We learn it one way or another how to try to be polite and gentlemanlike.
Right. Well, God bless you for that. And again, we're really thrilled to have you here tonight. Now, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's episode is really special because what Bear wanted to do was have a question and answer session with your questions. And many of you have mailed in your questions, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the response tonight because, these are some great questions, and it's really interesting. But what is going on? Oh, okay. One of our listeners saying they didn't get a YouTube notification. Ladies and gentlemen, if that happens, just check your settings. For some reason,
Bells get unrung.
Yeah, the bells get unclicked on YouTube, and I don't know why that happens, but I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do to fix it, but definitely, check with Facebook when we're always posting before we go on. So, but where was I going with this? I kind of lost my thoughts, but tonight is going to be question and answers. But Bear, first of all, before we go any further, well, I have a question for you, and I'm hoping that you can answer it, and I'm sure you can because it's your story. But why? How come you do this?
Well, when I was coming up, my grandfather always told me to watch who you tell because, there are people out there that's not going to even listen to this. Actually, they'll laugh at you and in your face and tell you how dumb you are for believing in something like that. And that's a key word here is believing. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to believe something, but it's another to know what's really there from actually viewing it or seeing it personally.
Right.
And I know that a lot of people out there, and I hate using this, PTSD syndrome has been bandied around a lot, especially from our great military, that been trained to protect our country and fight overseas and things like that. And once they finish their tours or tour of duty, it's like a wadded up piece of paper. Mm-hmm. They come back home and they just, throw it on the ground. And these guys have been through some traumatic moments in their life that causes nightmares, things they've seen, things they've experienced mm-hmm. that nobody else has. And it's a very traumatic moment in that they relive it at all times. They try to, put it in another place in their mind, but it always sneaks back on them, especially in their dreams. I mean, you can't take away what you've experienced or you personally have seen. Mm-hmm. And when you see something like a Bigfoot, but I'm going to call them boogers a lot of times because that's what we basically grew up knowing them as being in mm-hmm. the South. We didn't know what a Bigfoot was. We didn't know what a Sasquatch was. And a lot of people get upset when they hear me use the term booger. And, they want to say, well, that's something that comes out of your nose. And that's kind of offensive. It is funny to the one who's saying it, but it really is offensive when that's what you grew up calling these things and sure. what other people, older people, would tell you these things were because they didn't have a name for them, so they mm-hmm. just called them a booger, Get in the house before the dark or a booger's going to get you, or there's always a booger over yonder on the other side of that hill and you need to stay away from there. When you run into one of these things, mm-hmm. you don't have nobody to talk to. Yeah. I mean, scientists and the government, they're not going to freely admit that there's something out there like this. And it's really mind-blowing when you actually see one, especially after, and, I get emails and messages all the time of people that are skeptic about these things actually existing. But it's a different story when they either accidentally or come face to face with reality and see one. Mm. Because then everything you've been taught, everything you've been told just takes a complete 180 turn. Yeah. You're seeing something that don't exist. And once you see one, it's so mind-blowing you want to share it with people. Well, the first thing you run into is that little problem my grandfather taught me and my brother at the time. He said that people will ridicule you. They will speak down to you, condescending, tell you you're ignorant, you imagined it, oh, there's no way. I don't know why people are that cruel at times to judge people mm-hmm. when people's trying to be sincere or serious about something. And there you go again. You're running into a roadblock. You're running into the wall. And right. you don't have nobody to talk to, nobody that'll listen. And it becomes a form of PTSD in regard to people who actually see these things because they don't have an outlet to discuss it. Right. The reason I do this, it's not for any money. I've never made a dime doing this. Mm-hmm. Not for profit. I just realize and know what I've experienced through my lifetime with those who innocently or ignorantly find out that I do know these things exist.
Mm-hmm.
Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to be the butt of a joke. And to be the butt of a joke when you're being so sincere and you know for a fact what you've seen, nobody can ever take that away from you. Actually, it ought to be thought of as a special moment. But a lot of people do not allow that to occur because there's so few numbers and people that have actually seen these things, and it's hard to find them. When the internet became more accessible in the late 90s and the early 2000s, that's when the internet just exploded. It was one of the best outlets anybody that had seen a Bigfoot or knew of a Bigfoot or heard something that they thought was one, where people of like mind could get together and discuss this. So that actually become a major plus. But it's still to the extent, if you go into a crowd of people and you bring the subject up, you're sitting there nervously wondering, well, who's going to be the one that's going to look at you and say, why? Have you seen one? And then what are you going to do, or what are you going to say? You're sitting there, you wanting to share it, you're wanting to talk about it,
mm-hmm.
but you automatically know right off the bat that, well, here we go again. I'm going to be the butt of the joke because I want to share this, hoping that somebody else understands it or has actually been in the same situation that I've been in to be able to freely discuss this in the open. And it never fails with a crowd of people. It just takes that one heckler to just really tear into you about it.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? You going to beat the heck out of everybody in the crowd? No, you're going to either slink off like a whooped dog, or you're going to sit there and just grin and take it. And I've had to learn to do that. And it's very humiliating, especially to your self-esteem, especially to the fact that you've actually seen something like this, for people to ridicule you publicly. So a lot of people just keep it to themselves, and they keep their mouths shut about their experiences. There may even be somebody listening to the show tonight or on archives later that, you know, they're going to say, this old boy is right about that.
Mm-hmm.
And here he is freely coming on the show talking of things that I've actually experienced, and it makes me feel good to know that there is somebody out there who's not worried about doing this, especially on a format like this. It drives up their self-esteem, it builds their confidence up, and especially it makes them throw away the self-doubt that, you know, I know that I've seen that, and here's this old cat from Mississippi named Bear, and he's seen it, and he hasn't got a problem with that. So, you know, there's somebody else out there that freely talk about it in this regard. It's an albatross that people have to tote around, and if you think about it, even if you're a skeptic, and you think about it from the perspective I'm presenting right now, people ought to be more understanding. It don't take much to figure out when you're listening to somebody whether they're telling you the truth or whether they're just trying to pull your leg or giving you a tall tale, because it's just aggravating and a form of depression that your best friends or even your family. I mean, I even have trouble with my family to this day, certain members of it, about the fact that I'm very interested in the subject to the extent I've gone out there and seen them, and once I admit to it, you know, that's when they start scoffing at the idea about it. But it helps. I like to think that I'm helping somebody right now that's listening to this show in regard to, you don't have to sit there with your nose in the corner, keeping silent, in regard to everybody. I'm not telling you to go out there and just proclaim it from the top of the world. I'm just saying that there are people in the North American continent, and it's really worldwide, but I'd rather deal with the ones that's in the North American continent and tell them that these things do exist. They are there, and you didn't imagine what you saw, and you don't have to sit there and silently torment yourself the rest of your days knowing what you've seen and that you're alone seeing it.
Yeah.
I've known people to get into very bad depression over the fact that people don't want to believe them and won't even give them time of day about thinking about it. You've got the commercials on TV like Jack Link's beef jerky and things like that that makes this thing into a joke. And it's automatically an automatic response because it is a joke seen, and I'm not picking on Jack Link's beef jerky.
Right.
But I think in a roundabout sort of way, that takes a lot of the heat off of the government trying to cover it up by making it a joke.
Yeah.
Because as long as it remains a joke, nobody's going to get serious about it.
Yep.
So if you've actually seen one or experienced one, whether by accident or it just showed up and, just turned your whole world around, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
You may think it is, but everybody, I would say 98.9% of the people in the United States and Canada scoff at the idea that something like this is real and exists. But I know better, and the people who've actually have seen one, by gosh, they know better too.
Right. Absolutely. And you're right. I even watching like newscasts, I've seen where they do they throw the old proverbial Bigfoot bone out there every once in a while, and it's set up with the newscasters scoffing their way into it, like, and coming up tonight on the next show is and it becomes some kind of joke, which is unfortunate because for the people that have experienced it, it's very real, it's very traumatic, and to have that dismissal has got to be really insulting.
It is. A lot of people remain in the closet over things they've known. I guarantee you there's probably people out there that has excellent video footage of this thing, or they have pretty good pictures of it. But the first thing a novice-type person to do, the first thing they're going to do, they're going to go to the information source, which in today is the computer. Right. And you can just about find anything on the computer. And, here they are. Well, I'm going to find a group of people of like mind, but first I want to do a little research or checking into it, over the internet. Mm-hmm. And then they'll see the ridicule within the community, the infighting, this belief, that belief, over this belief, over that belief. Mm-hmm. And after reading it a little bit, they'll turn around and say, well, there ain't no way in hell I'm going to come out of this closet because even the Bigfoot people can't get along. Yeah. And it's a big deterrent. And I think there's more evidence out there in video, film footage, and probably photographs that people are sitting on because why do they want to place themselves in a position to be ridiculed in public, especially in the mainline public? Right.
Yep. I would agree with you. And that's wonderful, and we're sure happy that you're doing it because, I know that I personally have learned a lot about the phenomenon by listening to you and through the years. So, I've always been a big fan of yours. So, again, thank you for what you do, and thank you for doing it. But
well, my thanks is knowing that I probably helped. If I just help one person listening tonight, I can go to bed with a clear conscience. I can also go to bed with a shit-eating grin on my face because if I help that one person out there confirm that they're not crazy, right, I feel like I've done what I'm intended to do.
Right. Absolutely. Well, brother, we got a bunch of listener questions lined up for you, so you ready to start chewing on those?
Oh, I'll give them a whirl. I'll say this before we start. Everything that I'll answer towards is things that I've personally experienced. If I don't have any idea in regard to the question, I'll freely say that up front. I'm not one of those type guys that can answer every question, but I will take a whack at it otherwise. If I've known of other researchers, and I hate that word researcher because,
Sorry.
I'm not a scientist. I was just put in a position that I didn't never ask for, and I just had a mentor that would help me along. If it wasn't for having my grandfather as a mentor, I don't know if I'd be on the radio right now. But for him to be understanding, which goes back to your original question, it helped me out a lot tremendously because he never ridiculed us or nothing. Of course, he already had his experience with one back in the 30s when he was courting or dating my grandmother at the time. And it is super fantastic to have somebody that you can talk to about it.
Absolutely. Well, let's give it a shot. We got 5 minutes before the first break, but we'll start the operation with the first email I got in, which was let's see. All right, this is from Jimmy Keene in Philadelphia. He says, "In your opinion, would say you had any aggressive encounters on your farm from the age of 20 and up?"
Well, I never really had what we considered aggressive encounters on the farm. You got to understand the ones that was on my grandfather's property, which I still own the property to this day. They was watching us, Bigfoot is not a solitary animal. That don't mean that he finds himself in a position at times to be solitary, because there are circumstances that dictate that one becomes solitary. And, I may not get into that tonight, depending on the questions. But most of the time, there's always safety in numbers. And so they have what we call a troop. And the only reason we call it a troop is because most primates are considered as troops. It's a family unit. Usually you have an alpha male, you have an alpha female, you have their offspring, the offspring begets other offspring. You have a sub-alpha male who's kind of like second in charge. And then you got the purpose of a Bigfoot troop is to protect the females, to protect the young, always establishing feeding grounds, feeding routines, which vary in distance. That's why you can't pattern them. P-A-T-T-E-R-N. I know I'm old country boy, and sometimes I spell out words to try to, because I know that I'm saying it in my way that I can understand it, but maybe the listening audience can't. But it's very important to have a pattern, and there's always a pattern to a troop or a Bigfoot. You just got to understand it. The ones on my granddaddy's property probably were the same ones that I seen when I was 6 years old. So these things on the property had been observing or watching my family, my grandparents, my brother, my sister, my grandmother, my mother, for many, many years. So there was never any opportunity that would make a traumatic moment. The only times I've ever gotten into traumatic moments with these things is when I go into unfamiliar territory and I run into one there from the experiences I learned from the family farm. And already knowing what exists there, it really wasn't a shock for me to realize that my grandfather's property was unique, because it was not the case. You can go to other locations anywhere from 30 to 40 to 100 and even 200-300 miles away from there in a radius, and you'd run into boogers that didn't know you, didn't know what you smelled like, what you looked like. It was more unexpected deals, and it always would it can either turn into a traumatic moment or a very uncomfortable moment, or you can accept it, being that I was experiencing the ones on my granddaddy's property. It gave me an edge in being ahead of the ball game. But even with an edge, you still are going to run into circumstances that can be a lot of fun. I say a lot of fun, but to the uninitiative, or the people who don't know nothing about it and run into something like this, it could turn into a hell of a situation. But I think we're close to your commercial time, and when we come back, I'll get into an instant or two to just show you an example of what I'm talking about.
Okay, that sounds about perfect. And we're going to go to a commercial in about 30 seconds. For those of you listening on YouTube, or watching on YouTube, rather, you're going to see a call-in number. I just want to let everybody know the call-in number is not going to work tonight. We're not using the live phones. We're just doing an email-only question and answer. So if you see that, don't call because you'll just be sitting on hold. But we're going to go to our break, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go away, and we'll come back with more of the bear and more of his insights into the amazing phenomenon of the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, boogers, whatever you want to call them, in just a couple minutes. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Paranormal Portal. And I'm your host, Brent Thomas. And I am absolutely thrilled to see you guys. And I'm seeing a lot of new faces in our YouTube feed. So thank you guys so much for stopping in and being a part of tonight's show. That's wonderful. And we're thrilled you're here. So thanks for stopping in. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I am always joined by my good friend and co-host, Mr. Don Longbeard.
Hey, how are you tonight? A couple things. Please like, please share and subscribe. And if you have any questions in the chat, you put it in the chat. Hopefully our friends Pixie and Lady Death will help me out. And thank you all for you newbies joining us tonight. We're excited that you're here. And also we're excited to have Bear with us.
Yes, and of course, welcome back to the show, Mr. Jim King, also better known as the Bear.
The Bar.
Welcome back, sir.
Well, we was talking about traumatic moments after the age of 20.
Yes.
In about 1984, 85, I can't remember which one, I was deer hunting 60 miles away from my normal haunts where I always hunt, and I don't have that much trouble being able to hunt in other locations. I've got a lot of family that owns land and probably a 6-county radius around, where I'm from, basically. So I was hunting in this location, in a undisclosed location bordering a swamp. And I'd been watching this huge buck deer, had a heck of a rack on his head. He would always come into this soybean field at the backside of this field, and we would see him from the highway. The only time we would see him was in the dark. We'd always spotlight the fields late in the evening after the sun done gone down, or, we'd spotlight it early in the mornings, and he would always be out there in the dark. But that's why he was able to grow those big old horns, because he was so smart that he was getting the heck out of Dodge when the sun come up. So I figured if I could get away back there and find his trail in and out of that soybean field, I could probably ambush him, while he comes out of that field. Normally a deer, after it's been feeding all night long, it'll go a short distance and then lay down and chew its cud for a little bit. Then it'll get up, meander on, and try to find a water source, depending on how much rain has been in the location. But I done already found what I thought was his trail coming in and out of the backside of that field. So I got up early one morning, about 4:30 in the morning, and I went down in there. I wanted to kind of ambush him when he's coming out of that field. And I never saw him. And it become daylight, about 10:30 in the morning. So, I crawled down out of my climbing stand, and I went over there to the trail, and I started just kind of paralleling the trail. That way I could plan an ambush site for him maybe late that evening, but I didn't think I could get him that evening. I figured I'd get him in the morning. And I found this trail, and it was parallel in this creek. And the trail was running along the south bank of this creek, and it went into this big honeysuckle thicket that had a bunch of cane in it. Cane thickets can grow very thick, very grouped together.
Oh, okay.
And I noticed, and this should have been the warning sign that should have given it away, I noticed that this trail kind of went into this thicket. I mean, cane, when it grows together, will grow together, I'm talking about inches apart, but something had been through this cane thicket, heavily bodied enough that there was kind of like this opening about 3 to 4 foot tall off the ground, and I had to stoop down and basically get on my hands and knees to follow that little trail in there, because I got to thinking that, maybe this old buck is laying up in that cane thicket. Before I went into it, though, I also noticed there was this a blackjack oak tree on the bank of that creek, but all this cane had grown around it. And, I looked up at that old tree. It looked like it'd been there about 70 or 80 years, may have been there longer because the forks of it was branching off. And I got to thinking that, well, if I could put my stand up in that tree, I could probably have a better opportunity at ambushing that buck. So let me follow this old little game trail into this cane thicket to see if I can get into there so I can put my stand up in that blackjack oak tree. Mm-hmm. Well, kind of got down on my hands and knees, and here was the first clue where I should have known better, but I didn't.
Uh-oh.
After crawling in there for about, I guess, maybe 8 or 9 yards into it, the trail all of a sudden inverted itself back to the left, going away from the creek and from the tree. A deer normally moves in a straight line. It will deviate from its path if there's a foreign object there that forces it to go around it. Mm-hmm. But there wasn't no foreign object there. It was, if you will picture in your mind the letter V, mm-hmm. and I was going from one side of the V to the other, and it turned back to my left. Well, I kind of thought about that a second. I said, something about this ain't right, but I'm already in it halfway, so I'll just follow it on through and see where it goes. So here I go. I turn to the left into that section of the V, and it went about 4 or 5 more yards, and I'd be darned if it didn't invert back to the right again. Now I'm really sitting here scratching my head about it. Mm-hmm. If you envision in your mind a backwards letter N as in never, mm-hmm. that's kind of the configuration that was going through this cane thicket. And I said, well, darn, and I looked up down the path, and about 3 or 4 more yards into that trail that I was basically on my hands and knees crawling through, holding my rifle, I looked through there, and I could see what looked like a basic opening in that little thicket. Of course, it wasn't like totally packed ground. It looked like something had been in there and threshed a bunch of that cane down. And if people know anything about those cane thickets, that's super as heck to thrash around and beat down. And I said, well, because I still had in my mind that big old white-tailed buck deer. Uh-huh. I said, I wonder if that rascal's getting up in here and he's bedding in that thicket, why nobody can see him in the daytime.
Right.
So here I go into that leg of the backwards N, heading into the semi-opening, and the semi-opening because when the cane was threshed, you could see it, but it was broken way down to about 12-inch stalks, and you had stalks laying every which way in there, and basically kind of opening up a opening there in the middle, but you had all kind of thrashed cane in there. So I come to the opening where it kind of went into a rough, square, rectangular opening, and I looked back to my right and saw that big old blackjack oak tree right there. And I looked up at that tree. I said, that rascal's perfect to put a stand in. Uh-huh. And then I just swept my eyes to my left across that opening. And I seen something laying over there in the corner, but it was weird looking. It wasn't no deer. It was a dark reddish color. It's not really red. It's more like a maroonish red. Mm-hmm. Best way I can describe it, it's not like a brown of an otter or a beaver, but it's got sort of a reddish tint to it. And what I was looking at, I couldn't really see that plain because of the threshed cane, so I kind of raised up on my knees, and I was on my knees looking at it, and here's what I saw. It was a damn Bigfoot laying on the ground asleep.
Oh my God.
Wow. He was just dreaming.
Well, I'm going to describe the position this rascal was in because this all happened so fast. There's no way. I mean, I'm telling the story, but what I've already just said and we're laughing about, it all happened that fast.
Right.
Wow.
What I'm going to eventually end up telling you.
Sure.
But I've been able to process it over the years. I went in there looking for a deer, and there I see a damn booger.
Yeah.
This rascal was laying on its stomach, if you want to call it laying. It had its head turned towards the opening where I was at on my knees holding my rifle.
Oh, my God.
It had both of its arms up under its chest like a baby does, a newborn baby. I know the listeners know this. I know you guys know this. You go to the hospital, and most of the time, the babies aren't on their backs. You always put them on their stomachs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this thing had both arms up under its body.
Wow.
But it also had its butt raised up in the air with its knees up under it, just like a newborn babe. Y'all know what I'm talking about?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Its butt was elevated upwards, higher than any other part of its body, but the reason it was that way was because it had its knees up under it.
Right.
Uh-huh.
It was in, I guess you would call it, to be more scientifically, a fetal position,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay?
Uh-huh.
First thing that hit my mind, oh, shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I bet.
That's a damn booger.
Whoa.
So here I go trying to raise my gun up, and I'm thinking, I need to get the hell out of here. It was a good thing. I never noticed it up until then, but if there was any wind, it was nothing blowing. I mean, it was still,
Right.
which that may have been a good thing. But evidently, me raising my gun up, that son of a gun opened its eyes looking dead at me.
Oh, no.
It never blinked.
Ugh.
Now, I'm going into the explanation of why it was laying like it was.
Okay.
It used its arms under its chest cavity and pushed itself up. All at the same time when it did this, the knees underneath it in that fetal position sprang up just like a dang, it was on a spring.
Oh.
It pushed up and its knees come up into as bipedal a position as their knees can go. One thing real quick, which if people say they've seen a Bigfoot and you ask them what position were their knees in, and they said there was lock-kneed position like a human standing at a full attention, then they ain't seen a Bigfoot. For some strange reason, a Bigfoot cannot lock its knees.
Mm-hmm.
It always has sort of like a crouch type effect to their knees.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen a Bigfoot that can lock its knees. So if somebody ever tells you it's in a lock-kneed position, they either lying or they ain't seen a Bigfoot.
Right.
But anyway, when it sprang upwards, this sucker started huffing. It was going, oh, oh, oh. It was in a low tone.
Uh-huh.
Then what it did, and I realized this later, especially after more experience over the years since then, that this thing was as scared of me as I was of it, and it was trying to build up its nerve to get the hell out of there. But I had its exit covered.
Oh,
I
boy.
was standing on my knees in the middle of that exit.
Oh, no.
When he jumped up, I stood up as fast as I could. I was wearing boots. My legs were shaking so bad I could feel the top rim of my boots vibrating off of my shins.
Oh, no.
That's how bad I was shaking.
Oh, man.
My gun was shaking like a metrodome. I mean, I couldn't keep nothing steady. I never brought it up to port arms to my shoulder. But getting back to the booger, when he started huffing at me, it started moving to my right, which was its left, but it never turned its back on me. It was always looking dead at me. And its off arm, the arm not positioned toward me, he'd start swinging it out and hitting that wall of cane behind it, threshing cane every time he'd hit it. And he started out in a slow motion. He went to its left, thrashing for about 4 or 5 steps. Then it immediately turned around and went to its right, which was my left. And then it started thrashing the cane with its right arm. And the intensity and the frequency of the huffing started picking up. It was getting louder and louder. It was like it was building up into a crescendo.
Ooh.
And then the force it was hitting that wall of cane with was increasing in intensity also. So that's how I figured out that it was working up its own nerve to do something, but I didn't know what the hell what. I knew it had to be bad.
Yeah.
I just crawled in this stuff. There's no way I could have, if I just wanted to turn around and start running out of it, I couldn't have physically done it. But getting back to the story, it turned back to its right, then it stopped and went back to its left again, picking up a little more speed. It was bipedal at this time. It was, and all of a sudden, here this rascal just tears straight toward me.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oof.
Screaming. It had its arms up it wasn't over its head, and it was screaming so I could feel, I could smell its breath. This thing, it was pounding in my chest. I was sitting there shaking, done already hit my safety off. In other words, I could have pulled the trigger. I was using a semi-automatic rifle, even though I knew that the rifle wouldn't have been able to take it down. Guesstimate, it was 7+ foot tall, and this thing was barreling straight at me. Now, I don't know at what point in time, because we were separated by maybe about 10 yards at the most. It may have been less than that. And you got to think how fast this occurred.
Right.
I'd like to think that I could have pulled the trigger. And even if I would have pulled the trigger, with him barreling straight at me like he was, screaming bloody murder like he was, I think even if I'd have been able to shoot him 2 or 3 times, its momentum still would have took me down.
Right.
Just before it got to the end of my rifle barrel, which I didn't have to sight down my gun. I mean, this thing was right on top of me. I had my gun pointed in the direction. Just before I'd like to think I was ready to pull the trigger, it veered off to my right and tore through that wall of cane just like it was paper mache. It wasn't nothing to it for him to rip through that damn wall of cane. It got on the outside of that cane thicket, and it was still huffing and growling and raising 10 times worth of hell. There was no way I was going to crawl back out of there. So what I did, I never turned my back to where I heard it growling and raising hell on the perimeter of that cane thicket. I would hit those canes with my back shoulder and all that honeysuckle intertwined between it had thorns and sticker briars in it. I ripped my flannel shirt off on the sleeves where I was using my elbows to just use the weight of my body to push through there. Every time I try to raise my gun barrel up, it would catch in some of those intertwining honeysuckle vines that was all in there. But I'd always pull it up. Mm-hmm. Finally, I physically tore out of there. It felt like forever, but it had to be 3 or 4 minutes. And this sucker was right there on the edge of that cane thicket the whole length of time. And I finally got out of there, done ripped my shirt to pieces. I didn't know it at the time. I done cut both elbows. I still got scars on both elbows from that incident because I ripped them open pretty good. They didn't take stitches, but I was just ripping them, just getting out of there.
Sure.
When I finally got out of there, I was still shaking. I think that was the moment I started growing gray in my beard and on my head. But
I think I understand completely. Wow.
well, when I cleared that cane thicket, there was a little ridge over there towards the east of me. I had to head back south to go to where I'd parked my truck, and it was about a mile away from where I parked my truck, maybe 3/4 of a mile, because it was a huge soybean field.
Mm-hmm.
And that rascal went on the other side of that ridge, still growling, still raising 20 times worth of hell at me, and paced me all the way out to my truck. When I got out there to my truck, I had to break out into the right-of-way where the road was, and it was in the open. And I was worried several times he was going to break out in that opening. But I was shaking so bad trying to hold my gun in my left hand while I was trying to get my truck keys out of my pocket. I was shaking so bad I couldn't even get my right hand into my pocket to pull my keys out. Finally got my keys out to unlock the truck, opened the door, jumped in the truck, threw my gun in the truck, and hauled ass out of there. Went straight home, drove almost 60 miles, got to the house. My wife was there. It was about 11:30 in the morning, 12 o'clock, and she said, "What the hell are you doing home? What's wrong with you? You're all white in the face." And I wouldn't talk to her about it. I just went straight to the gun cabinet, and the gun was still loaded. I never unloaded the gun.
Wow.
Throwed the gun in the gun cabinet and went straight to the bedroom.
Oh.
I swore then and there I'd never go back in the woods again. And you know what's so funny about this, if you want to call it funny? I'd already knew about these things on my granddaddy's place. But see, those up there, as I mentioned earlier, they had been watching our whole family for years.
Right.
And, I mean, but I run into one that ain't been watching my family for years. Are you with me? And he wasn't none too gentle, and he wasn't none too happy about it.
Right. Oh, yeah. That was a very aggressive display.
Well,
that's
I got in the bed. I wouldn't get out of the bed. I was scared to death. I done vowed to myself several times. I done replayed it in my mind all the way home. I don't even remember driving home because it was predominantly in my mind.
Right.
And I just said to myself, I am never going hunting again, never going hunting again. You know, so something out there like that, I ain't never going hunting again. Then I got to started rationally thinking about it. I said, wait a damn minute. I said, the ones on my property, they have had plenty of times over the year to be just as aggressive as him. What is so different? And then I put it together. I was a new smell. I was a new sight. I was new everything to this guy because I wasn't even thinking about him being anywhere in the country because as far as I was concerned, the only boogers anywhere in the country up until that point in time was on my granddaddy's place, and I done already seen the Patterson-Gimlin film, and I knew the only other place there was up yonder in the Pacific Northwest, which them wasn't bothering me a lick in Mississippi. So I got mad then. I said, I ain't going to let no stinking ass friggin' booger run me out of doing what I love to do. So I got my ass up out of bed at 3 o'clock that evening. I went back in there, changed my shirt. My wife asked what in the hell happened to my shirt. Cleaned off my elbows, got all the blood off of them, everything, put a few Band-Aids on it. Went back in there, opened up the gun cabinet, grabbed my gun. She said, would you tell me what in the hell's going on? I said, I'm going hunting. She said, I thought you went hunting this morning, but you come back home. I said, well, I'm going to do what I love doing. There ain't nothing going to stop me from doing it. And I loaded my gun back up, went straight back to the deer camp, and I've been getting at it ever since.
Wow.
There you go.
And that's probably the key is that you didn't let it defeat you. You challenged it and overcame, and so that became your strength. So that's a great account. I usually hear that they're not alone, and we only got about a minute before break, but do you have the idea that one was actually alone, or was it, do you think, a part of a family group that was in the area?
After I found out what I have over the years, I realized that it was a perimeter sentinel.
Oh, okay.
One that's always on the perimeter of the family troop, which is in the dead center, and they always give alarms to any unknown person or human or something unknown coming into that area. After the break, we'll get into some more. Y'all think about questions you've got to ask about this incident, because I've told a lot of things that's very important to know in the way I described what happened right there that I figured out later on.
Right.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to our hour break here. It's already flying by, and we'll continue with your questions with the bear when we come back. Don't go away, everybody.
Censorship.
Play their games. Everybody loves to place their bets. They don't understand the price I paid. They don't care to comprehend. Trace their lines upon my body, ripping scars across my heart. Raging anger boils inside me as their lies keep falling apart. With my silence, I am not a stupid boy. No more breaking me with kindness, just you dance upon my joy. Leading me with empty promise, you're just another fucking mess. Taking off the slice of my sanity, just make sure that you're well fed.
This looks extraordinarily bad.
They linger in a perpetual dream state, a nightmare from which they cannot wake. I can't see you, Mommy. Where are you? I've never sensed anything like it. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. They're attracted to the one thing about her that is different from themselves. Her life force. It is very strong. It gives off its own illumination. It is a light that implies life and memory of love and home and earthly pleasures. Something they desperately desire, but can't have anymore. Right now, she's the closest thing to that.
Poltergeists are usually associated with an individual. Hauntings seem to be connected with an area. A house, usually.
Poltergeist disturbances are of fairly short duration, perhaps a couple of months. Hauntings can go on for years.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Paranormal Portal. And I'm your host, Brent Thomas, on this fine Saturday night. And of course, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Mr. Don Longbeard.
Hola.
And we are rocking the night away. It's been
yes,
a
we
busy night. A great conversation, excellent feedback and advice from Bear, and it's great to hear your stories firsthand, because I've of course listened to you for years, and I learned from every one of them. But thanks again for being here, brother, and we are absolutely thrilled you're here.
Well, I appreciate it. You guys have been good to me, and I'm loyal to my friends.
There you go.
Oh, well, we're honored to be among your friends for sure.
My grandfather told me after the incident, I talked to him about it, and he said, "You ain't going to let them son of bitches keep you from doing what you love to do, are you?" I said, "No, sir, I'm not." I said, "What do you recommend to do?" He said, "Learn everything you can about them, even though I know there's not much you can learn, because you ain't going to find many people that have much to offer to you, so you got to go out there and figure it out yourself." So from that point forward was about the time I really, really, really started paying more attention to these things. I knew then wherever I'd go hunting, not to fool myself into thinking that there's not a possibility that I could run into another incident just like that. I do know, and I've said this half a dozen times, that moment that occurred right there that I just described is the most traumatic moment I've ever had in regard to a Bigfoot. I do know that when I'm asleep at night, it gets me every time. Here's what happens. You know, when you're sleeping and you're dreaming, that same scenario is always run back through my mind. Was I ever going to pull that trigger, or did I get a case of buck fever? You got to remember, I was shaking. I was scared to death. And, you know, I was used to the fact of these things really existing. And that blows my mind. Then, was I ever going to pull that trigger, or one night is that rascal going to grab me? And that will probably be the last night of my existence on this mortal plane. I really think that's going to happen. Because about once every 2 or 3 years, I have that dream, and every time I'll wake up shaking, sweating, and I have to get up and go into the living room and calm down, you know, get my mind off of it. But it's revisited me so many times in my dreams that I just wonder, one day, is that rascal going to get me?
Wow.
But I've learned through the years, when more people got to know me a little bit, and I've read of their accounts and the things they've run into, and a lot of times it is hunters that, because they're out there in the woods and they run into this thing. I know a lot of people who have actually quit doing what they love to do, which is the art of hunting, that have totally quit hunting over running into one of these things.
Yeah.
And I've heard of their incidents, and yeah, some of them were pretty wild. Some of them was just seeing something that these things, once they get to the extent they determine that they have scared you, because I've learned they can sense fear.
Oh.
And I've noticed over the years that the more you're afraid or the more that you fear these things, I've done a little studying. When you're scared of something, your heart rate increases. When your heart rate increases, you start sweating more through the pores of your skin. You've all heard the saying, the smell of fear, right. And it is a stink that is very distinctive. These things can smell or sense if you're really scared of them, and the more they can sense this feeling or emotion, it seems like they get excited to the extent where they amp up their aggression. I've seen it happen too many times on too many outings with people who would show up and never have experienced one before, and we'd use one of our calls to bring them in. Didn't make no difference, how many times they could sit there and tell you, well, I ain't scared of no damn Bigfoot. Show me a Bigfoot. Show me a Bigfoot. Right. Best example I can give you is what I like telling people. I can take 5 people and go to a backyard where it don't even have to be a big dog. It could just be a dog in the backyard. Mm-hmm. And I'd go and ask them before I'd go into the backyard. I'd say, okay, if any of you guys are scared of a dog, let me know now. Well, you're standing there in front of 4 of your other buddies, and you ain't going to admit like hell that you're scared of dogs.
Yeah. But
I can take those 5 guys into that backyard, and do you know the one that dog will agitate?
The one that's scared of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same thing happens with horses. I'm a horseman. I've had horses my whole life. I watch people that want to ride a horse. I want to ride a horse. But you go and you saddle that horse for them, you're ready for them to get up in the saddle, and that one horse can sense it right off the bat. That sucker will turn in circles trying to avoid you putting your foot up in the stirrup to get on his back. I've even seen horses intentionally step on their feet to keep them from getting on their back. And occasionally I've seen a horse turn around and bite the hell out of somebody that's scared of them. You can say you're not scared, but animals sense fear.
Yeah.
And with Bigfoot, yes, he can sense it right off the bat. You're not fooling nobody but yourself.
I believe you 100%. I've experienced it myself with many animals that, they either love me or they hate me. And sometimes I'm pretty sure it has everything to do with me.
Right.
That I'm doing something differently when they don't like me. So we should probably get to another.
Well, a lot of people want to say they can read minds and things like that. Well, if that's the case, dogs and horses can too. All it's doing is what's instinctive to it for survival. Yeah. And once people cloud the issue too much by adding more into it than they really need to. I have this saying, I call it the KISS theory. It's keep it simple, stupid. Yeah. Don't turn around and make it complicated. Mm-hmm. The clues are there. You just got to take the time to actually figure it out. Right. And I've done just exactly what my grandfather said. He said, if you want to be successful, you need to study this thing as much as you can. There's no books on it showing its habits. There's nothing out there to tell you what it can do. There's speculations. But you got to get out there and get into that laboratory, which is the woods, and figure this thing out on your own. And I've had a small amount of success doing it, and I'm still learning to this very minute. I ain't dead yet.
Right. Well,
hey,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say we've got a question, and it's kind of related to what you were just talking about, and it just kind of, if you could just boil it down real quick. Green Mountain Cryptid Research is asking, are they friendly? And also, what would provoke an attack, and are they always aggressive? Now, you've said that they show aggression to scare whatever off. Is that always the case? So are they friendly?
It's not always the case. You can take one extreme one direction and then
Right.
you can go the other.
Right.
I would not recommend going out there singing Kumbaya with it, trying to hold his hand.
Taking Jack Link's.
And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I really don't.
No, yeah.
What I'm saying is this. With every wild creature in the forest,
Right.
it was not born in an controlled environment. It does not want to be cuddled. It has survived all these years and decades and possibly even centuries without human help at all. When you go out there and you start wanting to carry on, say, a love relationship, well, and I don't mean it sexually. I just mean,
Right.
let's go out there and be friends with these things. These things choose not to be our friends. We don't make the choice.
Right.
They've made the choice a long time ago that they don't trust humans. They don't want nothing to do with humans. Right. Yes, I know that a lot of people are sitting there, well, wait a minute, I can feed them and they'll come around. You damn right they will. They're opportunists. If you're going to sit there and put out the damn feed bag and they don't have to go out there and bust their ass to find it, they're going to take advantage of what you're giving them. Right. They're also going to take advantage of things that they can't get on their own.
Right.
Chocolate. How do you know that if you're giving them damn chocolate that you're not killing them? Because, you see them every day, right? No, you don't. Say you give one chocolate and it gives it to its infant, then you don't see the infant again. You're sitting there saying, well, I guess they done moved on to greener pastures. Well, how do you know that?
Right.
Or did the chocolate have an adverse effect on its anatomy and its chemicals in its body and kill it? Actually, you probably murdered the thing and you didn't even realize it. So you want to give it an easy answer.
Right.
It's not that simple. All of it is in regard to being friendly with them, and the best advice I can give is one word: respect. If you go out there and introduce something to them that they can't get on their own, and you think you're doing something so benevolent and that they thank you the world for it, no, they don't. All they're doing is taking advantage of an opportunity that you are ignorantly giving to them. You ought to just leave them alone, respect them for what they are, respect them for being the keeper of the forest, the spirit of the wind. That's what the First Nation people think of these things as. The First Nation people have the best philosophy of all. You don't never see Cherokee or Cheyenne or Arapaho or Kiowa or any First Nation tribe out there benevolently giving them blankets and feeding them food and things like this. They realize that Mother Nature takes care of its own self. These things don't need our help. These things will respect you more by treating them as what they are. And their primitive logic is, I choose not to have nothing to do with humans. So respect that. Don't push the issue. If you respect that, I promise you will have more success with respect and patience through time than you'd ever would by ignorantly giving them a jar of peanut butter. Hell, they could even be allergic to peanut butter like humans are. We don't know what their anatomy is.
Sure.
So how can you ignorantly say that you're helping them and you're friends with them? They're my friends. I'm a part of the forest people. Oh, aren't they beautiful? Yes, they're beautiful because they're the Creator's greatest creation. I actually think they are the spirits of the forest and the whispering of the wind through the trees because they watch out for nature.
Right.
Right.
I would agree. I'm
Excellent.
going to get to the next question here. This will be this is a little longer, so it's got a little bit of a narrative to it. This person is Rob M., and he's coming from Central Texas. And he's working on saving up for a trip to Alaska, but he says, like I mentioned previously, I'm not a big paranormal person, and Bigfoot was not really anything I even thought about much. But during my travels, especially in remote forest areas, I slowly started to become aware of something out there that I couldn't quite put my finger on. After a while, I started to pick up on some recurring patterns or tells. The number one thing was how my dog Charlie acted. Charlie was, and it says he passed away a few months ago, a big lab hound mix and loved the outdoors. Was not afraid of anything and was as smart as they came. Whenever we would arrive at a new location, he would come out of the RV and, of course, look around and sniff a lot and mark, dog stuff. But sometimes he would sniff and his hackles would stand up and he would start growling, a growl I'd never heard before, very low in tremor and resonance. I just wrote it off as him picking up the scent of coyotes or something, but in these locations, he had no desire to explore and would stay in the RV, and when he did come out, he would stay close to me like white on rice. And he says, the second thing I picked up on the woods were sounds. It doesn't take long being out in the wild to get to know the sounds of the forest, especially at night. Heavily forested areas are eerily quiet during the day, but at night the sounds are quite a cacophony of different sounds that become part of a background. So whenever it would go dead silent, you really notice it. The first time this happened, I actually didn't notice right away, but then Charlie started growling, and all of a sudden, the very sound of the tree snapping in the distance broke the silence. I jumped up and grabbed my gun and on instinct and was like, WTF, what was that? This went on all night, moving all around me in a clockwise pattern. Needless to say, there was no sleeping that night. In the morning, I hiked around my campsite, and there were huge limbs broken off of trees every quarter mile or so all around my site. I took pictures to show to the next ranger I saw and asked them what caused this, although in the back of my mind, I kind of knew what it was. My encounter with rangers about this was too long and weird to get into, but left me more curious than before. I have since gotten used to this happening time to time, but it still triggers that uneasy feeling knowing something is out there watching me. Sorry, and it says, sorry for the long intro, but here is my question for Bear. Do you think being in an RV attracts them? I know they tend to be very curious, and if so, is there anything I can do to make sure they stay at a distance? The Dog Man Land Between the Lakes RV story seriously freaked me out. Thanks in advance, and I'm looking forward to the show this Saturday. And hopefully Rob's out there listening, so take it away, brother.
Thanks for sharing that, Rob. There's so much in what you said, I could actually do the whole 2-hour show on his text. But I'm going to try to keep it brief, but that's a miracle in and of itself because there's so much information to be shared just from what he just read. Dogs, what I've come to find out with dogs with Bigfoot, if a Bigfoot's not hungry for a dog or a canine, they get along fine. I mean this. I've seen it happen. I ain't saying I've seen them frolic in the pasture out there playing with each other. I've seen video footage of dogs right there while the Bigfoot was behind the tree trying to mess with the camera by sticking a twig or a piece of sage in front of it just to snap the pictures. What he didn't know was we was using video footage instead of using photos. And what happened was this dog come along the game trail where we had the camera pointing. Bigfoot was sitting there. You could see the twig go right in front of the darn camera lens the whole time. Occasionally seeing this big old finger, what I'm assuming was, whatever it was holding the twig. And then the dog is sitting over there. Actually, the dog ain't even paying this thing no attention. And then all of a sudden, the dog looks up. His ears are cocked. It's on alert. His tail straight out. And it looks over there toward where the camera is. And then it starts wagging its tail and starts walking up there to where the camera's at. Evidently, at that point in time, because I asked the landowner, we had permission to put the camera there, did he ever lose that dog, or the dog ever turn up missing? He said, no, there he is right yonder eating. You see him. This old yellow mongrel right yonder. And sure enough, after we looked through the footage, you know, and it was the same dog. So at that given point in time, the Bigfoot was not interested in making Fido a meal. But then we also had other footage using the same dog and watching this dog go down this path. It's kind of funny. It walks down another path. We had a camera on the same property put in another position. And here this dog just lackluster, just walking along, his old tongue hanging out, walking past the camera. Next thing you know, here comes that sucker running straight back the way he just come. His tail tucked so far up between his legs, it was tickling the bottom of his chin. He was whining, he was hauling ass, and behind it, you could hear, because the Bigfoot had sense enough not to come out in front of the camera for some strange reason, which I could get into that all by itself. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to try to stick with the story. At that point in time, it was winter. I got to noticing that. And then I got to thinking back about that other incident. It was the green up. I was seeing all these fresh shoots on these bushes and on these trees. That's when there's more to eat than a Bigfoot needs. That's when he becomes a vegetarian, more of a vegetarian in the spring and summertime when everything's green. When everything starts wilting up and dying in the fall of the year, that's why leaves change colors, the whole 9 yards. That's when they become more carnivorous, in other words, a meat eater. The footage that was showing the dog going this way and then hauling ass the other way, scared to death, was during the winter months. I was sitting there looking at the trees, and they didn't have no leaves on them. I put two and two together. Everything's common sense. It tells a story, and the signs are right in front of you. You just got to figure it out. And that's when Fido become on the menu.
Okay.
I mean, a dog can forget things quick. Go out there, I'll tell you what, I know nobody is abusive to the dogs, but, you know, just discipline your dog. Get on to his ass real hard. I mean, and, you know, he'll slink down to the ground and won't be wagging his tail. He knows that he done something wrong. He ain't figured out what it was. But I can promise you, within 3 or 4 hours, you can go out there on that front porch after scolding that dog, and that dog will forget all about that.
Yeah.
Are you with me on this deal? Now,
absolutely.
A dog has got enough sense to know when he can get away with something, and he's got enough self-preservation in him that he senses. Now, see, we're talking about another animal. He can sense when the environment changes. It's almost like flipping a light switch. Everything's cool and good, you know, in the springtime of year, and, you know, dog ain't worried about a booger or nothing. Then when on the menu that certain time of the year, you know, he becomes a meal. A dog can smell and hear things that we as humans cannot hear. We have come to the conclusion that a Bigfoot also has hearing frequencies way above ours or way below ours. The biggest misconception in the Bigfoot community is people want to humanize a Bigfoot. That's where they screw up big time. Right. These things have abilities, survival abilities, which means it's got to have an acute hearing. It's got to have an acute sense of smell. It has abilities to sense things just like a dog, just like a cat. You sit there and watch a cat in your house, and there'll be a mouse in your house, and that sucker stand there like a statue. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
All right? There are times, and I'm coming back to Rob's story here. You remember what he said? There's times I'd let him out, and he'd go around there and mark the property, blah, 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 so forth and so on. We used to, in Mississippi, we can run deer with hunting dogs. It's almost a dying sport or a dying method of hunting. But back in the day when I was hunting real hard, we was using dogs. I've turned some of the best deer hounds loose on deer, and they'll run them suckers all over the country. But I can pull up to a certain area with these same dogs, turn them out of the box, and every one of them, there'd be as many as 4 to 5 dogs in a pack that we'd run these deer with. I can let them out of the dog box, and they'll hit the ground. First thing they do, they start sniffing every tree in the vicinity, and then they start whining. And then you sit there and you watch your dogs, and they'll slink that old tail between the legs, and them old ears will droop down. And we don't have what we call bear in Mississippi. Now, Rob may be running into bear up there in Alaska or wherever he's going to. I'm not saying it's not a bear, because the dog's reaction would be the same towards a large predator. But I do know that when Bigfoot's been in that location and its scent is there, because we would always turn these dogs loose on noted game trails. We knew that the deer was crossing in there. Wouldn't Bigfoot be following the game, especially during the lean time of the years, which hunting season is in the fall and winter?
Hey, Bear.
So Bigfoot evidently was in that location, or it was a huge predator.
We're going to go to...
There's not really that many huge predators in the state of Mississippi other than Bigfoot, even though the government won't recognize it that way.
Okay,
but you
Bear,
turn them dogs out
Bear,
at certain locations, they'll start whining and moaning
Bear.
and groaning. And, yeah.
We got to go to our last break here in just a couple seconds. So just hold that thought, and we'll be back in a couple seconds, ladies and gentlemen, for our last break.
All right.
All right. We'll be right back. welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the last half hour of our show. It's just flying by tonight. Oh my God. But we may not have moved through many questions, ladies and gentlemen, but I wouldn't change a thing because everything that's being discussed tonight, I think, is just amazing, and it's great information, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So welcome back, Bear, and thank you so much for being here and for fielding these questions. How's it going for you so far, sir?
Oh, it's going great. I'm like you. I just wish I could answer everybody's questions, and I could. It's just, or try my best to. Let's get back on that other, because we ain't got much left.
All right, brother. Hit the ground running.
All right, we're getting back to this other part of his deal here. When you go to a new location, say you take your RV, he mentioned that. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to get into the dog man or the man dog. I'm really not into that, and my knowledge is not that advanced on it. I have on the perimeter, because if you're in the woods dealing with Bigfoot, you're going to run into other things that makes you scratch your head and say, what the hell is that? But, I don't like diversifying it. I like keeping it focused on the one thing that I've studied most of my life, and that's this amazing creature. When you park your RV in a location, especially for a hunt, you got to urinate. I'm sure you got an RV. I'm sure you may even have a bathroom in that RV. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to go out there and urinate. I know for a fact the minute you turn your dog loose, that dog going to go out there and wet every damn tree and bush and limb in a circumference around that camp. He's establishing my territory. Then you have them moments like Rob described. Hope I got his name right. Mm-hmm. It's not an insult. If I didn't, I just forgot it. But I think I have.
Yeah, you did.
You're going to have them moments where you're going to hear all the night creatures all around you. And we've run into this on outings in the past. We use what we call we use calls that we learned over the years through experience, mainly me and others that have been in the same situation, and they picked up on this. But we would use calls to elicit responses from them, and we would draw these things in. And when they'd come in either with an attitude. When they come in with an attitude, everything, all insect noise, everything in the immediate vicinity just quits, just like you hit that light switch I was talking about earlier about the dog. Mm-hmm. It just quits when they come in with an attitude. Guess why it quits? All the surrounding animals and insect noise can either hear something in a frequency that we as humans cannot hear. This includes the insects more than the other animals, or the other mammals in the immediate vicinity can sense when this thing has an attitude. It is all survival instinct. It is an instinct that we as humans, because of modernization, don't have to rely on anymore. We live in 4 walls. We don't live outside. We don't go outside having to rely on harvesting our game to eat. We go to the local grocery store. We've lost the instinct, the sixth sense. Mm-hmm. Y'all have heard of the movie and everything. People have their opinions what the sixth sense is. I've always said the sixth sense was our survival instinct. And most First Nation people, all the mountain men, all people that had anything to do throughout history in surviving in the wild would always have these premonitions when things wasn't going right. I'll tell you this, it's an instinct that is so deeply ingrained in all of us that we need to listen to it more.
Sure.
If something tells you something don't feel right about this, my granddaddy always said, don't do it. Don't press the issue because something bad's going to happen. About 8 times out of 10, something bad always happens. Hunters, outdoors people, ones who camp a lot, the ones who love the outdoors to the extent they're out there all the time, they know the environment, the surroundings, everything in it. They have a minute sense of this sixth sense survival instinct. It will save your ass, I promise you. It has saved mine numerous times in the wild. There's nothing special about it. It's just a sense that we through modernization, have lost the ability to rely upon. We don't need it anymore for survival because we're not living out in the environment anymore. But some of us who out there all the time, we still retain it. Mm-hmm. Now, that's that feeling that he was talking about. Sometimes when he goes out there, you know, something don't feel right. Well, there's a reason something don't feel right. Now, it could be a grizzly bear, it could be a black bear, it could be a puma or cougar or panther. But I know for a fact when it's a Bigfoot with an attitude, it'll kick in with me just like I've been hit upside the head with a drumstick. Mm-hmm. It's like when you hit that switch, something changes. And when it changes, every animal in the immediate vicinity. Well, when that occurs, remember, let's go back to the dogs in the back, that dog in the backyard and the horses again. Yeah. You cannot tell me that when you sense that something's not right, what happens? Your heart rate increases. Your pheromone scents come through the pores of your skin, through the sweat glands. Mm-hmm. The smell of fear, you cannot fool it. It will sneak its way out every time. And if that thing is close enough to you and it gets a whiff of that smell, you are at its mercy. Mm-hmm. There you go. That combined with the dog marking an established or a possible established Bigfoot territory that you don't realize you're in the middle of, those are triggers that will cause a Bigfoot to terrorize you. The more your fear increases, the more active it becomes. It'll start snapping trees all around the perimeter. He mentioned it's encircled him all night long. Yeah. And all that sucker was doing was tormenting the hell out of him. Because I promise you, if he wanted to physically do something, there would have been nothing you could do to stop him. Yeah. These things work more through intimidation than anything. They recognize the fact, for some strange reason, that if somebody or a human belongs in that area, there's consequences that come from its actions. This thing goes to extraordinary lengths to keep its existence or itself unseen, unknown by humans for a reason. That goes back to the respect factor I mentioned earlier. I have gotten more results by already knowing this thing is there and respecting the fact that it's there. Mm-hmm. It's even something as simple as walking along a pathway and you eat, say, a Snicker bar. Well, you sit there and you eat your Snicker bar, and then you're wrapping from that bar. I've walked through woods all over the state of Mississippi, all over the South, especially Bigfooting or hunting, mm-hmm. and see these darn Snicker wrappers on the ground, or cigarette butts on the ground, chewing gum wrappers on the ground, bottles, cans where they was drinking a soft drink, something thrown on the ground. I will pick these things up. If something is watching you, mm-hmm. do something even as insignificant and as benevolent as it is, nobody knows you did it. But then again, there's something out there that could be watching you do that. Right. I've done those type actions for years. Every time we have an outing with the outlaw group, I would always leave a campsite cleaner than it was when we got there, because it does make a difference. You're showing respect for an environment. I'll even go you one farther than that. You're showing respect for its living room. Mm-hmm. And if I come in your house and throw all my candy wrappers and all on the floor, boy, you wouldn't want to bring my ass back, would you?
we could sit at the picnic table outside maybe, but not in the living room anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, but Mama would be in that house mumbling because that sorry SOB sitting out there throwing the wrappers on the ground at the picnic table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Come out with
But that's the best way I can answer his question.
Yeah.
And I hope a lot of people are listening to what I'm saying. I don't have all the answers, but I do know showing respect instead of forcing something on them that they choose not to want. They don't need our help.
Right.
I promise you they don't. If they needed our help, what few of us that have actually seen one, we would never see nothing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you know, one of the beauties of tonight's show and with your dialogue, Bear, is that you're actually answering quite a few of the emails just through the narrative of the few that we've addressed. So you're actually hitting a lot more than it sounds like. But I wouldn't change anything because I've learned I learn something every time I listen to you. So it's always a great thing. But that was outstanding. Let me get to another one here. Let's see. This is one that has to do with the Honey Island Swamp Monster. Are you familiar with that one? This is from Lady Death.
Very familiar. I've actually been down there and investigated a sighting in a small town north of there called Sandy Hook off the Pearl River. See, the Pearl River comes down through Mississippi and it floods into the Honey Island Swamp Basin.
Okay. Well, the question is, do you know the Honey Island Swamp Monster? If so, is it gator, Bigfoot, or bipedal reptilian? What do you think of the footprints sighted there?
Don't know about the footprint so much. I do know a lot of people want to say it's three-toed. Mm-hmm. I also know a lot of three-toed tracks are mistakenly when a Bigfoot goes into a quadrupedal position, in other words, all fours instead of walking bipedally. Okay. Let me say this before I keep going. Even in the Pacific Northwest, everything I've learned, these things will use a quadrupedal motion, all fours, which when it does, it becomes what we call a knuckle walker, just like an orangutan, just like a gorilla. It don't use the palms of its hand. If you form a knuckles right now and you hit the ground, if you're limber enough to do that, 3 knuckles are more prominent about bearing the weight on the front end of your body. That's your index finger, your saluting middle finger, and your ring finger.
Yep, yeah, that's a great point. I had never thought of that, but you're absolutely right. That could definitely speak to
when it goes into a quadrupedal position, its feet does not remain flat on the ground. This sucker ain't flat-footed. Now, you remember what I said at one of the first things I did in the first hour when I was talking about the one that I run into, that was asleep, and he jumped up and that a Bigfoot cannot lock its knees? Right. There's a reason for that. Okay. If you guys listening will stand up right now and kind of lock your feet, not straight, but just give them a little bit. Just give a little bit. Where's the most pressure on the bottom of your foot? Is it on the heel or is it on the front of your foot?
It'd be on the heel, yeah.
No, it won't be on the heel. The heel would be elevated.
Oh, you mean if your legs are bent? I'm sorry, I wasn't following.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not chastising you. I'm just trying to help you a little bit.
I'm just trying to be right.
Yeah. Well, when it drops into a quad position and becomes a knuckle walker, its heels elevate further. It's like a woman wearing high heel shoes, only the booger ain't got the stem sticking from the high heel shoes. Mm-hmm. It would be the front pad of the foot contacting the ground with its knuckles contacting the ground from its arms. Right. When it walks, that front pad of the foot will almost hit the back of the 3-knuckle print, making it look like a dang footprint if you looked at it overall in length, size, and width.
Right. Gotcha.
I'm not hearing you, Don.
Okay. I do know there's alligators down there at Honey Island Swamp. I also know that alligators got 3 toes or whatever, but see, they're splayed like a ostrich or a emu, a large bird. Okay. Only a gator is a reptile. I do know for a fact that Honey Island Swamp has its own version of a Bigfoot. Tell you another little secret. It's an environment deal. Do you know that a lot of the Bigfoot tracks found in swampy locations are wider feet? Do you know why they're wider? It's like, let's use an Alaskan phrase here. How do you walk through snow? You have to have snowshoes, right?
Oh, sure. Okay. So it helps.
They got a wider foot because they're dispersing their weight and able to not sink as bad with a wider foot.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
It's environmental or ecosystem type deal. These things are all over the continental United States and North America. Like I said, other places too. I just deal mostly that in the North American continent. And every location that has these things that has adapted to that environment and the ecosystem has minute differences from others in other parts of this country. Mm-hmm. In mountains, they walk more bipedally. More flat land rolling hills and other mountainous areas like the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, they will be more like a quadrupedal motion unless they're going up a steep grade or an incline. Mm-hmm. Then they'll drop down on all fours and use their hands and all to pull themselves upwards. I'll tell the one real quick about the Sandy Hook investigation.
Okay.
This gentleman who was a Baptist preacher, he went on an outing with us in my home territory back in 2001. He was studying, he was an apprentice studying to become a full-time minister in a church. Church was Sandy Hook, Mississippi, which is right on the Louisiana border between Mississippi and Louisiana. It's right off the Pearl River. Mm-hmm. He called me one night right after deer season, which deer season runs up here from November to January. This young man, 14 years old, got his first rifle for Christmas. It was a 30-30 lever action. I think it was a Marlin. I'm not sure, but I believe it was. Okay. This happened in 2002. He said, Bear, I really need you to come down here. This kid is almost suicidal. He's seen the devil in the swamp down here, and I'm thinking he actually seen a Bigfoot. Would you come down here and talk to him? I said, yeah, I'll be glad to come down there. So I drove down there about 2 weeks later, met up with the gentleman that went with us on the outing, who was the minister of that church, and he introduced me to this young man. He got this 30-30 rifle for Christmas. He was so proud of it. It was his first gun he ever had, and he couldn't wait to go hunting the very next week. He was out of school, so first thing he did, he takes out of his back door, which the backside of the property actually butted the beginning of Honey Island Swamp. Everything down there was very swampy, soft ground. Mm-hmm. He went in the woods. He knew the rudiments about hunting, but, he was a young man. He was still learning. He had his rifle. He was waiting to kill a big old buck deer. You always dream of killing a big one. Mm-hmm. When he went into the woods, something started thrashing bushes all around him, screaming, making weird noises, snapping off top of trees. You got to remember, yes, this is way south. It's not as defoliated as it is farther north, but you can still see through the trees pretty darn good. This thing actually appeared in front of him. He was covered in black hair. This thing looked like a demon. It had canine teeth. It snarled at him, grinned at him. It was grinning what he was doing. He was intimidating the hell out of the kid. Sure. Kid just went slap. He just lost it. And so he threw his gun down and run as fast as he could back to the house. And he hit the house, and he was crying and hysterically. His mom and his dad did everything they could, talk to him. He was just convinced that he'd seen a demon or the devil. Mm-hmm. And so they called the minister, and he come over there to see if he could help him out. And the young man told him the story about it between sobbing. He was scared to death about it. And that's when he called me. So I come down there and I met up with the young man, and I let him tell his story. Of course, he was very uncomfortable about telling a stranger about all this. He was really embarrassed about it, but he still was really scared. And, I figured out what it was immediately when he started describing the actions portrayed and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew what I was dealing with here. This young man had seen a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, son, there's nothing to be ashamed of. You've seen something that a lot of people would give their right arm to see.
Mm.
The First Nation people, the Choctaw down in this part of the country, say that it's an honor for a Bigfoot to show itself to him. I said, I don't figure you think that with this thing raising all sorts of sand and scaring the devil out of you. I said, the only devil involved is he scared it out of you. I said, man, you ought to be proud that you've seen something that most of the people in this country has never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
I said, don't you let this thing run you out of the woods and keep you from doing something. And that's when I told him the story about me knowing of these things and the incident with the cane thicket. That story has come back to curse me and to help me several times.
Oh, yeah.
I was able to talk to this gentleman, settle him down. I've called the preacher 2 or 3 times years ago. I've lost contact with him over the years. I know he still knows where to find me if he ever needs me again.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to him, and he said, yes, the young man has gotten a little older, a little more mature, and he's gone back to where he would take baby steps. He would start hunting with his grandfather and his daddy, and now he's able to hunt on his own again. And so I felt real good about that situation after everything was done. But that was a Bigfoot, and that was right there at Honey Island Swamp. I'm not saying they can't be nothing else in that swamp because, as I said earlier, when you do this, as much as I do, you do run into strange things out there that makes you scratch your head.
Right.
I had to tell you one time, I won't tell you tonight, it's a very humorous story about me and the biggest damn buzzard I ever seen in my life.
Oh.
And it's funny because it wasn't a buzzard,
Oh.
but it scared the hell out of me at the time.
All right. Well, we got about 3 minutes left of the show, Bear. Can you let people know how to keep in touch with what you're up to these days?
Well, since I was on the show the last time, I had problems we had internal problems with the Bigfoot Outlaw group, but it wasn't nothing we couldn't handle. Everything's gotten straightened out since then.
Good.
We are stronger than we've ever been. We started back with the original Outlaws just last week.
Yep.
on doing new broadcasts from Bigfoot Outlaw Radio. You can find it on YouTube. All you have to do is type in Bigfoot Outlaw Radio. Go to BigfootCrossroads.com, and they will show the schedule of everything. We have a Facebook internet page. It's called the Bigfoot Outlaws Hideout. All you have to do is type in Bigfoot Outlaw Hideout, and you'll come to it. We accept a new membership. I'm over there, plus other outlaws over there, freely giving out information right and left, trying to help as many people as we can.
Well, that's just fantastic, and thank you so much. And I hope you'll come back and we can dive into some more of these questions real soon.
Now, I got some more questions I got to answer, so I reckon I got to come back. I ain't got no problem with it, as you can tell. I love running my mouth. I just hope with me running my mouth, I was able to help somebody out. And I really do appreciate the people who take time to listen to me, and I appreciate you and Longbeard for putting up with my ass.
We love it, though.
Absolutely. We wouldn't have it any other way. So, yeah, you and I will be in touch, and we'll figure out when the next time you'll be on, and we'll dive into more of these questions.
Yes.
But thank you so much for being here and being a part of the show, and thanks for sharing your wealth of information and experience, because, like I said, every time you're on, I learn something new, or, I get a new appreciation for what you've experienced and your vision regarding this amazing creature that's out there. So we are just thrilled, and it'll be great to have you on again as soon as you're able. So we'll be in touch with that.
All right. If y'all will, keep me online after the show's over, and we'll discuss that other.
All right, brother. I'm gonna after the show is done, I gotta disconnect, and then I'll contact you right back again. Okay?
Sounds great. Hey,
All right.
everybody listening, I appreciate y'all taking the time to listen. And look, this thing is the Creator's greatest creation. Like I said, he's the spirit of the forest.
Right on.
Just respect him.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys, and thank you all for listening out there. And hopefully, if you're checking us out on YouTube, you've liked the video, because I know there's a lot of you in there, and we're thrilled to meet all you new people that are stopped in tonight. And thank you all from iHeartRadio, TuneIn, TalkStream Live, and TFRLive.com. There's several thousand of you listening there, so stick around for Jimmy Jean Into the Microcosm coming up next on TFR, iHeart, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. And we will be back on Wednesday night for our Wednesday YouTube live stream. So we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice to each other, and take care of each other. And we'll see you on Wednesday night.